Fam, it's that time of year. The time of year when we reseed this team to continue doing what we've been doing for the last, 3 out of 4 years in the mix and all the way to the NFCCG. We're not done yet. We got unfinished business. I got Tony sitting there. Tony, I remember we started with Tony when he was just a child. He was a prodigy when it came to just good, intelligent sense when it came to football players. Look at him
Yes,
now.
sir.
He's a grown-up Tony. Tony, how you doing today?
I'm good, Ronbo. How are you, man? Good to be
Uh,
here as always. Thank you
Tony.
for giving us this floor tonight, and I'm excited for the opinions we're going to share.
Tony, like we were talking before we started here, this is like the first round, the second round, no. So now your expertise is going to be challenged, Tony, because the fact of the matter is you've got to come out with blue chip players, and you don't get a first or second round choice, third, fourth, fifth. But this has become like tradition in San Francisco since Shanahan and Lynch have arrived. Pretty soon, we're not going to need a first and second round pick anyway. We do better than that after the second round and third round anyway.
Exactly.
Tony.
Exactly. I
What
think
do you,
I'd rather have Christian McCaffrey and Trey Lance on the roster than be picking really high at like 5th or 10th overall. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword there, and I can't really complain. But it would be nice to have a first-round pick. It's a lot more exciting. But now that just means we have to do more of the dirty work moving forward.
there you go. Tony, are you ready to get underway?
I'm ready, Rombo. Whenever you're ready, let me know, and we'll kick this off.
Let it go.
All right. So basically, do you want to go through the trades that I'm making right now, or do you want to wait a little bit longer?
Uh, we can wait a little longer. We can wait because this is the
Okay.
sequence you've already gotten. By the way, if you want to ask Tony any questions, remember Q, and right next to we'll flag that down and we'll get it to Tony. He monitors this anyway, so he may answer your questions as he goes. All right, Tony.
Yeah. All right. So first, we're picking at 99 overall. I'm not trading up. The way I look at this is, for me, the guys from like 60 to 120, there's a lot of guys with a similar amount of value, and I'd rather pick 3 or more times in that range than only once or twice, right? And if we were to package all 3 of our third round picks, we could get to the end of the second round. But I really don't want to do that because the draft is a crapshoot already. So I'm staying at 99, and we're going to take a guard here, Chandler Zavala out of NC State. And Rombo, I love this guy. When you look at him, a guy that big should not move that quickly. His 40 time was a 501. He's 6'5", 325. But we're not here because he's a really fast guy. He's also very intelligent. And one of the things I really like about him is he has versatility in any scheme. He can run the wide zone. He can run gap scheme. He can do read option stuff. He really did it all. And I think when you're running an offense this year where you don't know who the quarterback is going to be at the beginning of the year, we think it'll be Trey Lance. That's what we're betting on. But it could be Sam Darnold. Brock Purdy could have an amazing comeback and be back by week 1 or 2, right? So is it likely? No. But you want to have a guy who has that versatility. So that's the first thing for me. We talked about the high IQ. This guy does not let blitzes get by him. He sees stunts, he picks them up. He can see delayed rushers, he can pick them up. Where other guys who come into the league, that's a part where they struggle with because they're new and they're younger players. But for him, it won't be a problem. I think for me, what sold me is his versatility in terms of playing all 5 positions, right? Because if you bring in a guard and he can only be a guard, to me, that's kind of an issue. We have a guy like Spencer Burford who can play both tackle spots and both guard spots. So let's say Zavala isn't great at right tackle, but he's great at right guard. We can kick Burford out to right tackle. So I think having multiple versatile players on that O-line is going to help a lot. John Feliciano as well is going to be a guy who can do those things. So for me, it's not about we need a right tackle. It's about who's the best offensive lineman available at this point. I think Blake Freeland will be gone. I don't think Nick Saldiveri is better than him. I don't think Tyler Steen is better than him. So for me, it was a pretty easy choice at 99. And I think he's going to be a riser as well in this process as it moves forward. But let's go over the negatives because I think that's important. He's a third-round pick for a reason, right, Rumbo? So
True.
First thing, back surgery. Over the last 3 years, he's only played 17 games. But from the information that I've found, he's fine now. It's not going to compound into worse things over time from what I looked up. And again, it is a concern, but I wouldn't be picking him at this spot if I felt like it was a big concern, right? The next thing for me in the run game, there are some issues where, yeah, he's a mauler, but sometimes he gets engaged on the second level and his hand slips, or he can't keep on the guy as much as you'd like to. And it's a very inconsistent run blocking for me in the second level. So that's an area where if it were better, maybe he's a second round pick. But right now, we're going to keep him here at 99 overall. I think that's where he'll go. Anywhere from the 60 to 120 range is my prediction for that. But that's all I have for him, Ronbo, if you want to add any thoughts for that.
And Tony, the thing is, I like that you're going offensive lineman first because that's the biggest worry by every 49er fan there is. Also, some of those things you mentioned as being negatives, those are coachable. We might be able to get him out of that. It's just technique. And Forster's a great offensive line coach because we've got some guys that are probably questionable before he even got to them, and they're not doing bad work now. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Got no problem with that.
One thing I forgot to say, his pass protection, again, is elite. Great. One of the best in the class for any of the guards that are here. But again, it's the run game for me. That is kind of a place where we can improve there. But let's move on to 101st overall. And this guy here, I don't know how popular he is among 49er spaces, but for me, the guy I'm going with is Darius Rush, cornerback out of South Carolina. One thing that I did here this year was I looked at the Shrine Bowl and I looked at the Senior Bowl, and I wanted to see who the standout players were. And for the guys that are going to be available later on in the draft, those are the guys you really want to look for, the guys who can stand out among the best competition in that group. And Darius Rush at the Shrine Bowl, exceptional, amazing. And what I love too is for what Steve Wilkes wants to do, it's a lot more single high than D'Amico. And again, we've always had the cover 3 shell type of thing here, but I think with Wilkes, we're going to see that a lot more. And that's where he's going to flourish, cover 3 press. And he's 6'2", 198. One of the things I love about him is maybe he's not the best at squeezing a route in the beginning, but once he gets to the catch point, once the ball is thrown, he can close so quickly because of his length. And I think his stop-start speed is actually better than he's getting credit for as well. So for me, being able to play those balls in tight windows, his ball skills are excellent. He's going to get interceptions for you. And I know for some people, it's a big deal to be a playmaker. If you're going to be a DB in the NFL, I know a lot of 49ers fans want that. And I think ultimately we saw that last year with Tart. We were very split in the fan base. Some wanted him because of how technically sound he was, but others were saying he's not a playmaker, let Hufanga shine. And I think those people were right in the end. So he is a playmaker in that way. I think something that the Niners look for in corners is physicality. We see that with Lenore. He's a very physical guy. He will throw his body at you in the run game, and he'll be physical with you in the pass game. And that's what Darius Rush will bring you here. And I think, again, when we're talking about guys that we're bringing in, you want to find traits. You can coach technique. You can coach anything that has to do with footwork or having the right hand technique, but you can't coach a mentality. Size is a skill. You can't coach that either. You can't tell someone to magically grow 3 inches. And he brings all of that with you. So for me, I think he could go as early as 60. I think, again, like Zavala, he could go as late as 120, 125. And to me, one of the things that I want to bring up as well is he's a former receiver. And we've seen guys like Richard Sherman and Trevon Diggs be very successful in the league. A big part of that is their understanding of how routes work. So those are the positives with him. In terms of negatives, his tackling, it's not that he doesn't try to tackle because he's physical. He'll throw his body at you, but he has a hard time staying balanced, and it creates inconsistency when he's tackling. Again, that's something you can coach. It's not the end all be all. The next thing, in man coverage, we talked about closing the gap when the ball's thrown, but the issue is sometimes the gap gets a bit big in the first place. And in man coverage, I don't think we'll be running a whole lot of it with Wilkes compared to the rest of the league. I think he was like 26th in man coverage percentage last year. So it's not going to be a big deal, which is why I love him at 100 overall. But in terms of man coverage, late to drive on the receivers was a big thing I saw, and that I would hope improves in the NFL. And the next thing I want to talk about, the last thing, is overall his fluidity in coverage. He has really stiff hips. And for anyone who knows, like if you're a track star and you have that track speed, he ran a 4.36. Sometimes it's harder for you to move laterally and open your body up and turn your hips to transition if you're playing a match coverage or if the receiver does a really sharp cut on a route, right? He's not going to be the best at that. And it's really hard to coach fluidity. It's something you kind of have to have. But for the cover three system, we saw Tariq Woolen last year. A lot of these same concerns. Great straight line speed, stiff hips. He was in the running for defensive rookie of the year because of the system he was in. So again, when you're picking the slate, you look for traits that fit into your system. He has all of it.
Sounds good because that's one of the reasons why I hated losing Mosley. Mosley had arrived at just the things you're talking about. His anticipation, closing that gap in the cover three is about the most important thing you can do. Richard Sherman actually trademarked that move years ago. You stand back, you'll lull that quarterback into believing he can get away with what he's about to do. Boom, got him. But this guy, you're talking about, Darius has got the length. He just, I don't know what you're saying about the coaching him up. Can we do it?
I think we can. I honestly think in terms of him versus Akello Witherspoon, two guys with pretty similar height, weight, speed profiles, I think it'll be easier because he has the physicality that Akello Witherspoon didn't have. I see him closing on routes way faster than Akello was. So I really don't have a problem with him. I think if he comes in, he'll be a day one starter on the outside. I really believe that.
All right. All right. He's got some competition. You mentioned Demo. Demo's going to be hard to take out of that spot now. I'm looking forward to that competition. Somebody could get his job, though. And a lot of people don't think Demo's that good. I like him because of the way he's developed. So, yeah, we'll see.
I like him a lot more as a slot corner because he doesn't have the deep speed or the height on the outside. But the physicality is real. And I think he has traits that the Niners love, and that's why they put him here. But let's get to the next pick here. And we have a trade. From 102 overall, I'm moving back. Again, I talked about the guys from the 60 to 120 range being very similar to me, and I'd rather have more picks than less picks. So from 102 overall, we're going to move back. We're going to give up that pick and the 247th overall pick, which is one of our 7th rounders. In return, New England is going to give us pick 117 and pick 135. So let's get into pick 117 then, Ronbo. This guy right here, to me, he's the best pure free safety in the class. I would not be surprised if he goes middle second round, but also it's a weaker safety class. And teams might not want to reach because he's the best free safety, the pure free safety in the class, right? So he could fall into the 4th round like I have him here. Overall, my range for him could be anywhere from 60 to 135. That's what I project that he'll go in. And I would not be surprised if he goes earlier than that, just given who he is as a player. But we're talking about Christopher Smith from Georgia, a free safety. And one of the things that I look at before I do these mock drafts and I find the guys to draft is who is a free agent next year, right? Do we have a plan moving forward? If not, if we don't have that succession plan, let's see who I can bring in. And for me, Tashawn Gibson is great, but he's on a 1-year deal. He might not be here next year, and he probably won't be. So Christopher Smith, as a pure free safety, will fit into that perfectly. Again, with Steve Wilkes running more of a single high cover 3 type of look. And he has the range, not necessarily the elite speed, but he has the range to go back and forth, patrol the whole middle of the field. And that's a big deal for me. When you talk about that, because you look at a guy like Hufanga, who's relatively slow compared to the rest of his team, but his range is a lot better than I think people give him credit for. He's going maybe not sideline to sideline, but he's closing to the sideline really quickly. And with Smith, he's not slow. He just doesn't have that elite speed. And I don't think it's a big deal for free safety because he has the range. He can cover sideline to sideline. That's not really a problem for me. I think another thing too, we look at Jimmy Ward, the way he was used. He was kind of a nickel back, big nickel. He's in the slot, or he's a free safety deep when they're running single high. He has that versatility as well in terms of being a Swiss Army knife. That's the word that I use for him, in a very similar role to Jimmy Ward. I think he can definitely do that. The thing that sold me on him, though, Ronbo, in a league that's moving more toward match coverage type principles, not only in cover 3, but in cover 4 and quarters and palms looks, he's incredibly receptive to the routes that are coming. His route recognition is exceptional. And his IQ overall, he just knows where he needs to be. And he's that guy who can set up his team and let them know, hey, you're right here. You need to move over here because a route is going to come into your area, right? He can do all those things. He can be the guy to communicate. And that was a thing that I really loved as well. His hip fluidity, we talked about Darius Rush, maybe not having that with him, not being able to open up his hips and run in a different direction without decelerating. That's not an issue for him. If you're running cover 4 and he's a safety and you have a deep post coming over the middle, he's going to be able to match that immediately because his hips are not stiff at all. They're very fluid, and he has the route recognition to do so. But I think for him, the reason why he could go in the 4th round is because of the negatives that we're going to list right now. Before I say this first point, he's physical. He wants to hit people hard. But when he is tackling, he's very indecisive. You see him at times kind of stutter step a little bit, try to get ready for the tackle, instead of going in head first and committing to making that tackle. We see Hufanga, he's so great at not hesitating, and he's very decisive. And I think his instincts are what really drive him to be the player that he is, a first-team All-Pro. But for Christopher Smith, maybe you don't have the same confidence when it comes to tackling. Maybe your instincts aren't as good because you're relying on your play recognition and your IQ. So that's the first negative for me. Again, this is a very coachable thing. It's not that he's scared of contact like an Akella Witherspoon or Tarvarius Moore. He's just indecisive when it comes to tackling. The next thing for me, which could be a big deal in some schemes, but I kind of wrote this off because he's going to be a free safety in a single high scheme. He's not really going to be in the run fit most of the time. In a cover 3 look, all your linebackers and your slot corner and your defensive linemen are going to be in the run fit. But your outside corners and your free safety are not going to be in the run fit. They're playing pass first on every down. Now, if he were in a cover 4 type system, the safeties are expected to come down and be the first support in the run, which we're going to run some of that, but not a lot of it. It's going to be mainly a single high cover 3 shell. But he cannot shed blocks in the second level. It's very apparent. He gets thrown around, and he's 5'10", 188. He plays a little bit bigger than that, just like Jimmy Ward kind of did. But again, he's not going to be throwing around a Chandler Zavala coming up the field in the second level, right? He's not going to beat the pulling guards. Even tight ends he struggled with a little bit. So is it a big deal for the system we're going to be running? Maybe not, but it's still something that I think is notable. I think overall his size, again, we just talked about it. He plays bigger than his size, but at the catch point, he gets beat a lot. And I think a good example for Niners fans is Ambry Thomas in the Bengals game a few years ago in overtime. He made that pick in overtime, but the whole game, he was kind of getting caught all over by Jamar Chase. He couldn't beat him at the catch point. And I think those are some of the same problems we might have. As a safety, not as big a deal as a corner. But again, it is still something that is hard to teach, getting someone to play bigger than they are at the catch point. And I think it's something that we need to monitor moving forward. And the last thing here that I put in terms of tackling, taking angles to the receiver, I think could use improvement. There's guys who make incredible plays because the angles they take are so precise. And you're like, how did he get from point A to point B in that amount of time? It's because of the angle he took. It was perfect. With Christopher Smith, again, that's not really something that you're seeing with him a whole lot. He's making false steps every here and there, not all the time, but every here and there. And in terms of taking the right angle, he has to slightly adjust it a lot, which is kind of a problem. And that's why I marked him as a pure free safety. I think it's a skill set that we need, but again, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt in the tackling department. So for me, that's why I chose him here. But again, I would not be surprised if he goes at 50 or 60. I wouldn't be. He's that type of player. And I know for a lot of people, in terms of a pure free safety, he's also number 1 on their board. So I recommend taking a look at him before you go into the draft. Get familiar. He's kind of like a Robin Hood player. Could go way earlier than people expect. But that's it for me on that one. Awesome player. I really want him. He's one of my draft crushes this year.
Tony, it just sounds like he has some confidence issues that might be able to be ironed out. First of all, put on a few pounds. At 188 coming to the NFL at that position, you probably need to put on at least 10 pounds. Hopefully it doesn't affect his speed and his athleticism. But the instincts, see, that's what makes Hufanga who he is. Tony, I got a feeling there's one out of maybe 150 guys that can play with Talanoa Hufanga's physicality and
Yeah.
his smarts and still not have that kind of speed and make the Pro Bowl. I was so impressed with that. But we saw him play. We saw him picking quarterbacks over and over. I was concerned about the fact that D'Amico might say, listen, Talanoa, you got to stop telegraphing that move from the line of scrimmage. I love the way you anticipate, but don't do it every snap because you got used a few times. Those are things that you learn as you go along, though. I think Hufanga is going to be better this year. But I like the choice. Other than the confidence, I think that's what it is.
But again, he's a 4th-round pick for a reason. You're not going to get the perfect guy. I think for what he is, confidence is not a huge deal. It's a big deal, but it's not a huge deal. You can still be a really good player without that confidence. So, that's it for me on 117.
All right.
I'm making another trade here. We're moving up to 120, and we're doing this with Pittsburgh. The Niners are going to give pick 120 and pick 234. Again, another 7th-round pick. And in return, they're getting 155, 164, and 253. So they're basically moving up a little bit in the 7th round by like 19 spots, but on the draft value chart, it's all the same thing. And for 120, you're going to get basically 2 5th-round picks, I believe. Or you're giving 2 5th-round picks for 120, if that makes sense. But with that pick at 120, this guy right here, my favorite player in the class, in terms of just pure draft crushes to me, he is one of the most underrated players that I have scouted this year by far. I put a little thread of him on Twitter if you want to hear a bit of a more detailed analysis on him. But the guy we're talking about, Josh Wiley, tight end Cincinnati at 120. And when you listen to people talk to him, it's always, oh, he's a great receiver. He has great route running. He's really big. He's 6'6", 248. But nobody talks about his blocking. And for me, I want to kind of get into that a little bit. When you are playing tight end, there's mainly 3 positions that you can be playing. You have your inline tight end, right, which is the guy playing next to the tackle on the line. He's not standing up. He has his hand in the dirt type of thing, okay? The second type of guy is a flex tight end, like an Evan Ingram, for example, who's usually playing in the slot. He's more of a big receiver type of guy than a true tight end. But Josh Wiley is the third of that group, and that is the H-back. And the H-back is responsible for moving all across the formation. He's in the backfield. He's maybe line up on the line of scrimmage, but standing up. He might line up in the slot. He might be in line. He's really a do-it-all, let's put you anywhere type of player. And I think for what the 49ers need right now, you need a guy who's very scheme versatile so you can keep George Kittle into block if you need it to get Hassan Reddick.
That's what I was thinking the whole time. Yes.
I think a lot of people think of it as, oh, we need a blocking tight end so Kittle can go out on routes. But Kittle can block like a Pro Bowl tackle at times. So why wouldn't you want to give yourself versatility to also keep him into block and have a guy who's a great vertical threat down the field? So for me, Josh Wiley, he can do all the blocking stuff and get Kittle out there, but he has a receiving element to where you can trust Kittle to block, and this guy's going to go make a play for you. So let's talk about him a little bit. For me, his draft range is anywhere from 100 to 150, give or take. Again, these aren't like perfect ranges. These are just where I project he could go. I don't see him lasting past the beginning of the 5th round. I think he's more of a 4th round type pick here. And again, we talked about the versatility, blocking in all positions. I want you guys to look at the Temple game. In the first quarter, just look at how many different positions he was in blocking. He was in the backfield. He was coming across the line in motion. He was a lead blocker. He did everything. And those are things that you need in this offense, especially if you're going to be running a zone read. I think for route running, it's some of the best in the class. Maybe it's not Dalton Kincaid level, but he's exceptional. It's more of an above average. You step into the league and you're at the upper half of route runners in the league with the room to grow to be even better than that. So from that standpoint, he has a really good understanding of where to get in between the safeties and linebackers in the second level. Even shorter than that, he has a really good recognition and feel for finding the soft spot in zone, sitting down and getting ready for a catch. These are all things I talk about in that Twitter thread that's linked to my my Twitter account. For me, what really does it, though, is the yak potential. And he's not going to run you over like a George Kittle. He's not going to run through you and put his head in you. He's not afraid to. but he's really good at making guys miss and setting them up in the open field. And for me, the reason why I'm not really big on guys like Luke Musgrave, who people are calling a top 50 pick, is because you have none of that. The second someone touches him, he's on the ground. No shot of breaking a tackle or making someone miss. But this guy, it's like you catch the ball, and in one step, he's already moving upfield. There aren't wasted steps, and it gives him time to set people up and run by them or run around them. So from the yak side of that, he's awesome. I love him. We talked about transitioning from catching to running in one step. It's not really something people look at, but I think it's a really big deal in a West Coast type offense where you want your tight end to run shallow sometimes and take it for 10 more yards, right? The last thing I want to talk about with him is his hands. He has a big frame. He has a really big wingspan. Again, he's 6'6", 248. He has like a high cut waist, and we'll kind of talk about that in a minute here in terms of negatives. But in terms of strengths, he gets down the field in a hurry. And when the ball's coming up, he's able to just get in a really good position with his wingspan and his length to catch a ball over somebody or make a diving catch. So for me, in terms of receiving, I think there's an argument to be made here that he's second or third in that department. Dalton Kincaid is in his own class. But then you get into the Luke Musgraves and the Sam Laportas of the world that you could argue are better than him in this area, but it's not definitive, right? So the blocking, the receiving, it's all there. But let's talk about the negatives now, because he is not Dalton Kincaid. He is not Darnell Washington. He's not Michael Mayer. The one thing I just talked about was the high cut waist. In the run game, the reason why I don't really see him as an inline tight end full time is because it causes leverage issues when your center of gravity is higher than it is lower compared to other players, right? And I think one thing I'm going to say here is he ends up on the ground a lot when you watch him. Not that he's getting thrown around. It's just more of a leverage thing. But the positive from that is this guy never makes a tackle. He holds them long enough to where he blocks them, his running back gets through, and then he falls on the ground after. You're never really seeing a blown block like that impact the play. So I think at the college game, that's good to see, but it might not hold up in the NFL. So don't make him an inline blocker. I think something we'll point to now is the production. And you look at his stats in college, and 2022, he really didn't have that elite production that maybe you would have seen from other guys. But one thing I'll say, it was not him. It was an offense-wide issue. Tyler Scott, maybe a top 100 pick in a lot of people's eyes, a receiver there. Awesome with Desmond Ridder. Probably going to be a second-round pick if Desmond Ridder stays this year, but he left. And with Josh Wiley, you could see the same type of impact on him. The passing game was not the same. His quarterback was not good. I'll put it frankly right there. He wasn't accurate. He wasn't leading guys. He wasn't doing the things that Ridder could do. And I think if you put him in the Niners system, it won't be a problem unless Sam Darnold's the quarterback. The next thing here, in terms of negatives, I think in terms of blocking, he's a decent blocker, but an area of growth is you find his arms outside on the shoulders way too often. You want to put it up inside the chest plate so you can drive a guy backwards. That's what Kittle does so well. He's able to not only get a low center of gravity, but he's putting his hands inside of your chest plate and pushing you back. You don't see that a whole lot with Josh Wiley. So I think this is a player that could develop into a top 5 tight end in football if used properly and if given the proper coaching, which I think is very possible. I think it's more likely that he's a mid-level tight end 1, excellent tight end 2 type of guy. But for me, again, like all of these positives that we talked about are too much for me to ignore. And I think at 120, people might not think that's a good value, but I'd be willing to take him at 100. And I know some other people are too. It's really picking your flavor of tight ends in this class.
And remember, George Kittle, who knew? I mean, he's out at Iowa. He's catching the ball for C.J. Beathard, of whom they were watching closely. And somebody just said, who's that? That's George Kittle. And
Yes, sir.
rest is history. So you may have something there. Some of the intangibles you mentioned, a lot of these things that you're talking about that are negatives can actually be coachable. I mean, the technique as far as blocking and that type of thing, which is, of course, Kyle Shanahan is a very extremely, if you can't do that, you're not going to play. And that goes with his wide receivers and everybody else. So, yeah, well, we'll see.
Yeah, I love this guy a lot. And the reason why I'm looking at tight ends so much is not only is it a really deep class, there's literally guys from 1 to 10 in the rankings that could be starters one day in the NFL, but it's also you have your two tight ends, Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner. They're going to be gone next year in free agency, right? I don't see a reason to bring them back if you can get these guys in the draft. And also, let's say you bring these guys in as a tight end 2 and George Kittle gets hurt. Now you have a good tight end 1. And if they're really good, you might even think about moving off of Kittle, who's getting to the end of his contract, where cutting him will save you a ton of money. And I'm not saying I want to cut George Kittle. He's an excellent football player. But when you're talking about $16 to $20 million in cap savings, if you can cut him for a guy that's becoming a top 10 tight end in the league, if that happens, it's always something you think about. Anyone is, in my opinion, prone to being cut or traded if the cap number is high enough. Doesn't mean I want Kittle to go. He's one of my favorite players. But from the business side of things, you have to think of it.
You're applying to 49ers' current MO. I mean, we're going to see if we can find somebody. Laken Tomlinson's gone. How many guys have we got that are gone? Well, maybe not. When I say DeForest Buckner, that was an accident. But we do say goodbye to players after we make drafts. With that in mind, we're going to replace him next year. I mean, you look at Aaron Banks, and he's filling in, he's working out. So these are the things you got to do if you're going to not become the Los Angeles Rams.
I think looking ahead like that is very important when you're a team that is picking so low. But let's move into 135 now. And this is a guy, I have no clue where he's going to go. Last year, I had a guy named Amari Barno, who I took at 134, and I thought he could go really early, or he could also go really late. And he went at like 190 something last year. The guy I'm going to talk about next is BJ Thompson from Stephen F. Austin, a standout at the Shrine Bowl. I'll say that much right now. And I think with him, you're really betting on the traits and the raw ability because it is incredible. His 40 time, lightning fast. For a guy who's 6'5", 238, should not move like that. He shouldn't bend like that. So I'm betting on Chris Kasurek to do his job, the job that he's done for a really good time, or really good job at, for a really long time, and mold him in a year or two into an elite pass rusher. Maybe he's never going to be that 3-down defensive end, but in terms of just putting your ears back and rushing the passer, this guy is going to be someone in the future with proper coaching that can be a 12-sack guy in the league, in my opinion. So let's talk about him a little bit. I think, again, the draft range anywhere from 75 to 225. I have no clue where he's going to go. Guys with traits like that don't really tend to last that long. But last year with Amari Barno, I saw even with those traits, you could still fall because you're not technically refined at all. So let's talk about his positives. In terms of his first step, it is lightning fast. His burst is lightning fast. And in terms of pass rushers, something that maybe you want a little bit more of with some of the guys that we had on the roster last year, like a Charles Omenihu or Samson Ebukam, is that first step. How fast can you get off the ball into the backfield? For this guy, it's not a problem at all. His twitchiness, in terms of just moving his body, like twitching a little bit when he's rushing the passer, getting in uncomfortable positions, is really good. He's kind of flexible in that way, and I think it's something that if you're going to be a designated pass rusher, you need to have. The next thing for me is in terms of the run game. He can hold the edge pretty well. For a guy who's not refined, that's pretty important, and it's something that you don't have to teach him. He can crash down on the edge. He can contain the edge, and it's not going to be an issue like 2020 where you have to move Eric Armstead outside because you have nobody who can fill that role. He can do that, but again, I don't think you want him in on rundowns this year. It's not a strength, but he can contain the edge. It's just more about if a tackle sets him up properly, can he get back to the inside? Or if he starts on the inside, can he get out to the edge type of thing? But I think those are things that you can coach, especially with Kasurek. The next thing for me that's very important for this scheme, and it might not be as important this year because D'Amico Ryans is gone, but we saw the NASCAR package last year where you have your edge rushers coming in the middle, mugging the gaps as stand-up rushers. For me, BJ Thompson, he can stand up and do that, but he can also be in a three-point stance, which is why I think he works for the wide 9. But if you want to be creative, you can move him all over the line of scrimmage on passing downs, and no one's going to be able to block him. So that was something for me when I was looking at it. Do I want to go after Jose Ramirez, for example, or Yaya Diaby. Can those guys do these things? And I kind of thought to myself, I don't know if they can do it to this guy's level. So that's why I picked him at 135. Let's get into the negatives here. There are a couple that I think are really important. And this guy's career is going to be determined by the coaching that he gets. So let's talk about those things. He's very, very raw. And his play strength along with that is not very good at all. He plays very light. And you can kind of see that when you look at him. He's a very like slender guy, almost like a Greek god in a way, but like a skinny Greek god. It's very weird. But the play strength there is a problem. I think he can maybe get from 238 to 250, maybe lose a little bit of speed, not much. He's still going to have all that burst, but playing at 250 will help him with the leverage issues, and it'll help him with his power, because at this point, it's really all speed. There's no power profile there. The next thing, again, being raw, the hand usage, the footwork, the counters, everything is not there. He's just kind of going out there and doing it and just hoping for the best. Let me see if this works. There's no plan to anything, and he doesn't have the tools to even create a plan. So that's why he's going to be at 135, in my opinion. He could go earlier on traits alone. I don't think that's out of the question. But at 135, I think that's a big reason why he might fall there. And I think another thing, too, is at the point of attack, maybe you want to see him play a bit stronger. Maybe you want to see him make a play more. I don't think it's necessarily out of the picture completely. When he's going up against running backs and tight ends, he runs through them and blows by them, no problem. But when you get to tackles and guards at the point of attack, can he make that play and shed a blocker? I don't know yet. So those are things that you look at. And for me, I'm drafting him as a pure pass rusher type player that can mold into a 10 to 12 sack guy per year with the right coaching on second and third downs.
You know, it reminds me, everything you were talking about kind of reminds me of Leonard Floyd. Floyd has a lot of technique, though. But, yeah, lane quick. But Floyd was also disruptive. He created a lot of violence. This guy, 230, he does have to, he's got to get to at least a 250. But they can work on that.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. We saw Drake Jackson put on like 15 pounds of muscle. So yeah. I don't think it'll be an issue. But again, he's at 135 because of how raw and unrefined he is. He's really just a go out there and do your best type player. So let's move on to 161 here. And it might be a surprise to some people because I already drafted a tight end. And you might be asking, why are we picking up 161? We have a trade here. And we're moving Ambry Thomas. The reason why I want to move off of him is for two reasons. He hasn't really been performing. He almost got cut last year. But more importantly, he's not going to be able to do the things that Steve Wilkes wants to do. He's okay in cover three. He's never been good in match. In terms of man coverage, that's really his bread and butter coming out of college was he's a great man player. He will beat you in man coverage, but we're not going to be running a lot of that. I'd rather him get moved and replace him with a Darius Rush type player who will fit the system and get a pick out of it. So for me, this trade here, we're getting 161 overall from Houston, which is a pick that they received from Dallas. In return for 161, we're giving a pick 216, which is a 6th-round pick, and Ambry Thomas. So we're getting a 5th-round pick. We're giving Thomas a 6th-round pick.
All right.
So 161.
Tony, can I get to Tony? Hold on. Let me see your knowledge. Jenna, G Block, I see you. You see, we're going live early on. Yeah, G Block, we're here. Thanks, G Block. Okay, sorry, Tony, go ahead.
No worries, no worries. 161. Brenton Strange out of Penn State. He can do some of the H-back work that Wiley does, but for me, I'm drafting him to be an inline tight end, and I want this to be a duo that for the next 4 years, they can be on the field together in the 2 tight end packages that we're going to see a lot more with Trey Lance, right? And in terms of kind of filling in where Wiley isn't very good, he fills in the traditional tight end role really, really well. So let's talk about that for a little bit. He's 6'4", 253. When you look at him, Josh Wiley's very high cut, and they have about the same weight. And Wiley's even 2 inches taller. But Brenton Strange is way lower to the ground in terms of his center of gravity. And as a blocker, you can really see that. He's very physical in the run game and after the catch in the passing game. And in terms of the blocking, he is one of the best blockers in the class. There might be some points where you want him to be better at blocking. But in my opinion, he's still a top 5 tight end blocker in the class. And something that I love is he finishes through people. there were a couple pancakes I saw through his film that I was very impressed with, where you have some of that George Kittle element where he can move maybe to tight end or maybe move to the outside as a receiver, and he can block you through the field and into the turf, into the stands. It doesn't matter. He can do that type of stuff. And for a physical team, you want someone who can set the tone like that. People say Debo and Kittle set the tone on offense because they're physical. We need to get another guy in there who can do that as well. For me, he's not a great route runner, and we'll talk about that. But when he gets the ball in his hands on like a shallow cross or on an in route, he can really, really have awesome yak potential running through guys, being physical. He has some of that wiggle to him where he can make a guy miss, but you're really going to be running through people more often than not with him. And his yak was really, really good in college. I think another thing for not being a super fast guy, he gets up the field in a hurry from, let's say, the line of scrimmage to 15 yards down the field. He's getting up there like a low 4.5 guy, right? He's getting up there way faster than his time would suggest. So that's a really big deal for me. And we're talking about third down, find your hot read, or find a guy at the sticks. He's going to be able to get there quickly. And the next thing that I think maybe Wiley could do more of, but Wiley's not bad at this, is catching balls through contact. When somebody throws a football to you and there's a guy barreling down at safety and he's about to hit you, are you going to remain calm and composed, put your hands up and catch it that way and come down with it? With him, he's great at that. And I think he might be one of the best in the class in that aspect, maybe after a Dalton Kincaid or a Michael Mayer. I think for him, when you can get those guys who are kind of short area of the field merchants, who you just need them to catch the ball and that's it. It's not a high risk throw. He's always going to catch the football. So again, for him, I could see him going anywhere from 100 to 200. I know some people have him in their top 100, but other people I've seen, he's outside of the top 200. It's really about what you're looking for. And if you think you can teach more of the route running stuff, which is what we're going to get into right now. I think his separation is terrible in terms of separating from a guy. He's never going to separate, which is why catching the ball through contact is so important. And he really has to use his body to get in position. You don't really want to see a whole lot of that. You want him to have that skill set there, but you don't want it to be his trump card in every single situation. So he's not going to separate. I think his route tree in general was really limited in college. So you don't know if he can do some of those other things. You can kind of piece together the way he moves and say, okay, if he can move this way, turning up the field or on the sideline, maybe he can run some more of these other routes, more of the deeper routes down the field. We just haven't seen it. So for me, that was kind of a problem. Where Josh Wiley, he ran everything. He was really running routes from the slot as a receiver. You saw him on the outside a couple times. You saw him in line at tight end. You saw him run routes from the backfield. Like, he did everything. With Strange, it's not the case. So we still need to see with him if he can do that. And the last thing, when I said in the beginning he's a good blocker, but he can improve, it's all about the hand usage. Where are you putting your hands when you're blocking a guy down the field? And for him, I think if he can fix those things, again, they're mechanical, they're technique things. It's not attitude or size, right? So you can teach it, just needs to get a lot better in that area. So for me, again, 161, give me another great tight end who could, I in my opinion, flourish into a tight end one day. You're just not sure right now, but you know for a fact he's going to be a great tight end 2 or 3.
I like it, Tony, and I love when you shop at the tight ends, because this particular draft is just supposedly loaded with them. And also remember, George Kittle came out, and after his best year, he asked Coach what he wanted him to do in the offseason. And what did Shanahan say? Work on your route running. You know, this is not something normal for tight ends, because what they are is brutal, and pretty much everything they do is physical. So what you're saying, he climbs the field, he gets in a position, he's ready to make the catch. If he's physical at the point where he's being contacted by the defender, this is good. We don't have guys that do that a lot. Jawan Jennings is one guy we got as a receiver that does that real well. George Kittle, of course, the master of battling with guys. But another guy like that, Ross Dwelly, not bad as far as getting downfield real quickly and being that open guy, as well as Juice. We got 2 guys that do that really well, or 3 actually, but having another one, because Bebop Jones wanted to know we got to get rid of Tyler Croft. Tyler Croft is already gone.
Yeah, he's
gone. Go ahead, continue.
Let me shut my blind a little bit more. That light is coming in really hard on me.
Okay.
I'll be right back. Give me like
Okay.
3 seconds.
All right. Yeah, tight ends. There's a lot of them in this draft this year, and probably when you have any kind of a position that's really got a lot of people in it, some of the best players are going to be either mistakenly picked late, or they're just going to fall because of the volume. Okay, Tony, go ahead.
All right, 173. This is one of our few picks that are one of ours. We didn't trade for it. And for me at 173, what I had to look at was who do I think might fall at maybe not a position that we need, but something that isn't really a strength on the roster right now, right? For me, that guy is Alex Forsyth out of Oregon, a center, and he's perfect for the wide zone. I think in this system, he could go as early as 100, 125, anywhere there because of how good he is in that type of system with his traits. But if you're not a team that runs a wide zone, maybe like Kansas City, you probably don't even have him in your top 200 players. So it's really a guy where you're relying on his movement skills and his instincts more than his pure power. And we're going to talk about that in a minute here. But he is, in my opinion, one of the smartest centers in the draft. And for me, when you look at Jake Brendel, he's okay. Like he's an average center. He's not going to wow you with anything he does to where you say, oh, wow, this guy's a top 10 center. He's moving guys down the field. He's running them over. That's not the case with him. And he moves well, but he's not anything crazy. With Forsyth, in a year or two, when you have, what's his name? Sorry, I forgot his name already. Daniel Brunskill.
Yeah.
He's off the team. Oh, my Lord. Center. What's his name? Jake Brendel, right? Jake Brendel.
Yeah.
I just have a lot of brain fog right now. If he's off the team or they're in a position where they can cut him, you bring in a guy like Forsyth on a 4-year contract as a rookie, and you say, okay, you're going to develop now, but in 2 years, you're going to be the guy. Let's get you ready for that point. So his football IQ is great. He mirrors really well against all different types of pass rushers. And there's never a point in his film where you say he's getting beat on a stunt or a guy's doing a spin move and he can't get there. He mirrors really, really well, and he's able to pick up every type of blitz there is. Stunts, delayed pressure, just head on the center, try to run through you. He can pick all that stuff up. And I think it's very important for a center to have that IQ because we've seen guys like Cronus Grasu in 2020 absolutely stink up the joint because he has no concept of where guys are going to be after the snap happens, right? One thing with him too, he has good mechanics. They're not great, but they're good. And he's able to mirror everything that comes his way. But really what you're looking for here is his athleticism and his agility. One of the best in the class at this position. I don't know if I quite trust him to pull as a center like a Cam Jurgens could last year, but he's not too far off. And I think in this wide zone offense, you need versatile guys who can move up and down the field with ease. He's going to be able to do that for you. He climbs the second level really well. When he engages with the defenders there, it's not an issue at all either. He's able to keep his hands on them and keep them out of the play. So for me, in terms of a 5th-round pick, these are more the things I'm looking for. Do you have the movement traits? Are you intelligent? Can we coach up some of the other things, right? And that's what he can do. I don't think his ceiling is as high as some of these other guys, but it's not low by any means. I think he can come in and be a top 10 center in the NFL one day. I believe that. But he's never going to be an Alex Mack type of guy, in my opinion, who's Tony, a perennial top 5.
Yeah, see, that's what I was getting concerned because, as you say, Alex Mack, his intelligence, I mean, Matty Ice did not even have to think. Mack actually diagnosed that defense real quick and told Matty what was coming up next, and they would go from there. This is the kind of guy Kyle Shanahan's offense has to have in order for it to be at its best. I don't know if Brendel's going to be able to handle that or not. Apparently, they like him a lot, so maybe he did show that kind of IQ. I don't know. I've always wondered about that, but I love what you're thinking here.
Yeah, I think with Jake Brendel, he's not an unintelligent player, but he's not wowing you with his intelligence. And for Forsyth here, he's a guy who can get his team ready pre-snap and post-snap to maybe see what the other team might do and tell them what they should be expecting moving forward. Where a guy like Jake Brendel, I don't know if he's doing that at the level that I think an Alex Mack would be doing. I think with Forsyth, mentally he can get to that point. But again, there's some of the physical limitations to me where he's very athletic, but he's not going to be a very heavy guy. He's always going to be around 300 pounds. So that's really it for me. The negatives, core strength. Again, he's not big. Against power rushers, if you have like a DJ Jones or an Al Woods coming up the middle, you might not want to put him one-on-one with that guy. You might want to have a double team there. He's not going to hold them like Creed Humphrey, where he can just stick you up and keep you where you are. That's an issue for me. I think the foot quickness in terms of like, I wouldn't want him going up the field all the time again as a pulling guard. He's not able to move his feet very quickly. So he has to readjust his upper body to make up for that lack of foot quickness. Again, foot quickness is not agility. It's a little bit different. Agility is more of how can you move your body, where foot quickness to me is purely your footwork and how fast you can move those and how quickly you can set yourself up. So he'll be great in zone blocking because you're going to an area and he's able to, again, be that agile guy. But foot quickness overall in terms of pass protection is kind of a concern. We talked about the core strength. Along with that, balance, kind of concerning when he has engaged defenders in the pass game. I'd like to see a little bit more of him keeping balance and staying where he is. I think it might benefit him to get 10 to 15 more pounds. I don't know how realistic that is with his frame. I don't know if he could fill out more, but that's something that I'd be concerned about. And he's also 24 years old, which is not really as big a deal this year.
No, but Mike, the thing is, all those negative traits reminded me of Mike McGlinchey. Every last thing you said that's possibly wrong with this individual, Mike McGlinchey went how many years? 5 years doing that, and he never got better. I thought he would. I kept arguing with people. He'll be okay. He's still developing. He never did. I said, well, I think it wasn't that bad last year. I could take that back to some degree.
I mean, he was okay. He was never great. I think for people who like Blake Freeland in the draft from BYU, he's going to be Mike McGlinchey 2.0. So I know a lot of people love him right now, but maybe you won't when you hear that quote. With Forsyth, it's not as big of a deal with foot quickness because he's not on the outside handling rushers from a wide 9 alignment, handling guys that are coming literally from a 6'5", 4'4", 40 standpoint, just trying to run around you or through you. It's not the same game. So I think those concerns aren't as big of a deal for Forsyth. But again, it still is a problem moving forward. And that's why he's going at 173 and not 60 or 70, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you ready for the next pick, Ronbo?
I am ready, Tony.
So we are in the 7th round now. I have 3 guys here. This guy right here, again, he's one of those BJ Thompson type guys where I could see him going in the top 100 because of the player he is, but I could also see him going into the 7th round. So I think you'll see this guy in a lot of 49er circles, very popular. Marte Mapu from Sacramento State. And
you're right.
He's going to be a safety to linebacker convert. And we'll talk about the concerns I have there. But in terms of playing a weak side linebacker, I think the coverage aspect of that is going to be very beneficial for this team. And he's a bigger guy too. He's 6'2", 218 for a safety spot. Might be a bit smaller for a linebacker. And I think in terms of being smaller, you can move better and you can play better in coverage. So maybe you don't want him on running downs all the time. Luckily, they have Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. That won't be a problem. But I think for him, his ideal fit would be in 2 to 3 years, maybe, be a full-time 4-3 weak side linebacker. I think, again, this guy could go in the 3rd round. He could go in the 7th round. I don't know because there is so much of him that you just need to have an acquired taste for to take him that early for me. So let's talk about his positives. Instincts and football IQ. We see with a guy like Talanoa Hufanga how you can make up for your physical shortcomings with your instincts and your intelligence. And for him, it's a lot of the same story. And I think on another Hufanga note, he's very physical. He will throw his body at you and he'll make sure that you feel him after you tackle him and you guys are getting up after that play. So I think those are 2 things, again, that are awesome for linebackers. You need to have the instincts. You need to know where you're going in coverage or where you're fitting the run. But you also need to be physical when you do that as well. So he has that. I think in terms of coverage versatility, this is where a lot of people will like him. And this is why he might be a 3rd or 4th round pick. He can play man. He can play zone. He can line up on your tight end. He can line up on your running back. He can even line up on a slot receiver, maybe a bigger slot receiver like a Jawan Jennings. But he has that versatility where you can use him in any type of coverage, and you can even build a coverage around him if you know what you're doing here. So again, for him, Marte Mapu, just I think it's more of that range that we talked about more than the pure speed. And I think having that range going across the field with his instincts are going to be really, really good for him. Let's talk about the negatives, though. I think with these guys that are kind of flirting with safety and flirting with linebacker, but they never have a home in between, that's a big problem historically. Guys don't work out when they're like that, right? So for me, I had to kind of take that into account. He might be too small to play linebacker, and he might not be quick enough to play safety. And for me, that could cause some big concerns. And I think durability as well at linebacker could be an issue here. I think with a guy like Isaiah Simmons, for example, he's a great example. They drafted him to be a safety, and then they were like, oh, middle training camp, let's move you to linebacker. Let's see how you do there. And he has not been worth the 8th overall pick. What?
Because of that speed with Isaiah Simmons. Remember, he was supposed to be the antidote in the NFC West to George Kittle for the Cardinals.
And that was not the case at all. And now he's just kind of like an average middle of the pack linebacker for them. He was not worth that pick. And again, he was one of those guys where before the draft you said, I can use him in so many ways. He is a jack of all trades, but he's also a master of none. He's not going to wow you in any department. He's just going to be really good in every area. For me, with this team, I think they can make it work, but I don't know because historically it has not worked for most people. So that's my main concern there. In terms of explosion, he's not very explosive, matching people when they're running routes or on breaks. And let's say you're playing a cover 4 quarters type of coverage where you're playing the middle of the field, but you also might be responsible for a post route coming from your side. I don't know if he's explosive enough or fluid enough in transition to stick his foot in the ground and keep running at 100 miles per hour. There's a lot of that lack of fluidity there, which concerns me. And if you keep him at linebacker, you can hide some of those problems. But again, he's more undersized, and that could cause bigger issues long term. I think the next thing for me, which is the biggest reason why I don't know if he'll ever be a great linebacker, he might just be a special teams guy, is his block sheds are not there at all. You see guys come up to the second level where a guy like Greenlaw and Warner can throw them off or get around them. This guy's not doing that. He's not shedding blocks really ever. And you can find some examples on film, but more often than not, he's getting ran through. And for a guy who's 6'2", 218, that concerns me. So again, these tweener types, they are jack of all trades, masters of none. That really concerns me. So that's why I think he'll be a 7th round pick. But from a pure coverage standpoint, I think it's worth taking that shot at 222.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise put him on the practice squad and get him a lot of milk and cheese, get him a little bigger. I always worry about confidence in level in some guys. Keller Witherspoon was scared to death when he first came to the NFL. I remember the conversation that John Lynch had to have with Kello, because remember, he would not put his nose into a tackle. And and you think about those kind of things. Once Kello got a little more manly out there, he became a little more aggressive. He started hitting people. It took him a year, but sometimes it's all about development. So you may have something there. Coverage is very important in the NFL right now with the passing league. If you can get a guy that can move quickly, Fred Warner is the standard, like we talked about earlier, as far as coverage goes and the ability to play linebacker. And he's the guy you're talking about when you're saying the guy in between. Fred Warner could make a great safety. He could lose weight. He'd probably still be as fast as good as anybody in the league. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that excites me. Is he going to last to 222? I don't know. If I had to guess, probably not. But I think he could be there, which is why I'm taking him here. But let's move to 234. This is the pick that we got from Pittsburgh when we swapped our 7th round picks in that deal. We're going to talk about Elijah Higgins out of Stanford. I profile him as a big slot receiver, but you'll hear a lot of people profile him as a tight end. I think in any other system or scheme, you'd want him as a tight end because of the things that he does really well. But for the 49ers, you're going to have Jawan Jennings as a restricted free agent next year. I want to prepare for that. So for me, Elijah Higgins is the pick here at 234. He's a big guy, 6'2.5", 228. And really what excites me is from a wide receiver position, he is an excellent run blocker. He's going to run through you. He's going to keep you engaged at the point of attack, and he's not going to let you go. This guy never makes a play in the run game. And for Jawan Jennings type, you need to have an excellent blocker who's very physical and is just automatic on third downs. I think this guy can do all of that. His yak potential is dangerous. He can get up in the open field and do a lot of good things there. He can not only make you miss, but he can be physical. He can throw a stiff arm at you, and it's not going to be a problem. So again, when we're talking about this big slot third down archetype, he's doing all the things that you want to see there. We talked about the physicality. I think overall, he gets really good releases off the line of scrimmage. He's not fast. He's not explosive, but he's getting up the field in a hurry, and you wouldn't expect him to move that way for a guy who's as slow as he is. Okay, so that's why people might profile him as a tight end more because of that. But he does get up the field quickly, and I think in zone coverage is really where he's going to flourish. He has a really good understanding, not just in the middle of the field, but toward the sidelines as well, of where you need to be to sit in between zones and give your quarterback a good target to throw to. And when we're talking about this archetype, that's one of the most important things on third down. Can you get into zone coverage and find the soft spot there? Can you sit down quickly and get up the field quickly so your quarterback can throw to you? So from a positive standpoint, it's all there. In terms of negatives, there are some things that are concerning. And I think Jawan Jennings coming out had a lot of these same concerns in terms of separation. He's not going to separate anywhere, anytime. He'll have at most maybe a yard of separation at any given point. He's really going to make his bread by being physical at the catch point and catching through contact. That's what you're going to see with Higgins and Jawan Jennings. But he's not going to separate. I think another issue with him too was in terms of coverages he went against, he didn't really have the bump and run type stuff going against him. And you need to have some experience versus press if you want to be a genuinely good third down option on every down. Because if a team sees that you're not good against press and you already can't separate, you could be having a long day in the NFL. And I think that is one of my main concerns with him that make him a 7th round pick as a receiver. If he were a tight end, maybe I could take him in the 150 to 250 range. But as a receiver, I'm thinking more 200 to 250 with him. So again, a lot of good traits. He's just, I wish he would catch more consistently through contact. And that's really my biggest knock on him. For a guy who can't separate and didn't face a lot of bump and run coverage at Stanford, if you can't catch consistently at the point of contact, that is a big concern. I think it's coachable because he's physical. I don't think he's scared of getting hit, but it's just something they need to work on with him moving forward.
In that case, it might be because Jawan Jennings, actually, Jennings is somehow, he runs good routes now. He used to have trouble through coverage. Sometimes he get held up in routes. He's gotten over that this last season, and he became, that's why he got the nickname Third and Jawan. He was that guy. So
yeah. All right.
All these things can be developed.
Are you ready for the last pick, Ronbo?
Let's have Mr. Irrelevant.
All right. We have at 255, linebacker / fullback Jack Coletto from Oregon State. He's never going to be a starter in the NFL, in my opinion. But what he is going to do, he's going to be an excellent special teamer. He came to the Shrine Bowl as a fullback, but he played linebacker in college along with that. And in terms of just being purely physical, being an excellent special teamer, he's going to do that for you. And a guy that I circled here that's not going to be here next year is Oren Burks, who they brought in to be a special teams ace. Coletto can be a backup linebacker like Burks is right now, but you're really drafting him to be a stud special teamer from day one. And I think that's really his main value in the NFL. Now, another great thing about that is we do employ a fullback, which means if Juszczyk gets hurt, you don't need to throw a Rostawelli or even a Josh Wiley back there. You can get Coletto, who already has experience doing these things. So I'm not really going to go too much into the positives and negatives. I don't think he's a starting caliber linebacker. I don't think he's ever going to be an excellent fullback. He might maybe crack the top 5, but only because of circumstance in the NFL, because most teams don't use one. But he's going to be that guy who can be used anywhere. He can be a running back, a tight end, a receiver, a linebacker, a fullback. He has that Taysom Hill type versatility minus the throwing aspect, right? And that's why you'd want to bring a guy like him in. I just think the special teams ability and the versatility he can add is too much to pass on. He might go undrafted, but I think it's more likely that a team with their last 7th round pick takes a flyer on this guy.
Sounds good to me, Tony, because you never know about some of these guys. And I always refer back to Brock Purdy. I understand he was pretty good at school, but I says, what are the odds? Okay, you're the last quarterback. And any other position I might think, well, that doesn't mean anything. But a quarterback comes in, the last body to be picked up, and he comes in and he runs a string. And if he doesn't get his elbow hurt, I have every reason to believe the 49ers are going to beat the Eagles, and he's in the Super Bowl. What are the odds? You can't count that, you know? I love your potpourri of stuff, though, Tony, and I love that you give the negatives and the positives. So it's not this guy I believe in because of this, and he's going to be rah rah rah. No, Tony tells you how it is, and they're going to scout him like that. I think scouts look at those things exactly that way too. So, well, Tony,
I completely agree. Let's get into questions. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, because I got a couple. What did you see any as well? Okay. Tony,
I saw one at the tail end,
Tony,
but I haven't seen all of them.
Tony, hold on a second. Let me run it down real quick so everybody remembers. Third pick 99. Tony picked up guard Chandler Zavala from North Carolina State, and third pick 101 cornerback Darius Rush, South Carolina. Fourth round pick 117 Christopher Smith, he's a free safety out of Georgia, and tight end Josh Wiley, Cincinnati. He's fourth pick at it's fourth round pick. That's fourth round pick also 135 edge B.J. Thompson, Stephen F. Austin. Also fifth round pick 161 tight end Brenton Strange, Penn State. Fifth round pick 173 center Alex Forsythe at Oregon, and seventh round pick 222 linebacker, a local boy about to make good, Marty Mapo, Sacramento State. And seventh round pick 234 wide receiver Elijah Higgins, he's out of Stanford. And seventh round pick 255 linebacker, fullback, should I say slash fullback, Jack Coletto, Oregon State. Tony, I'm looking at this. I see 1, 2, and I see 2 guys SEC products. Wait, 3. Yeah. Out of the South. Tony, I'm just curious about that. The trend now is the more you can get out of the South, it seems the better you flourish. Are you with that? A lot of people believe that.
I see why people think that way, but for me, when you're talking about high profile, like first, second round, that is more important to me. But third round, 7th round, I'm looking for traits and guys that fit a system that I can mold into something. And you're not always going to find those trait guys at these bigger schools in the SEC because all the great starters are already taking their spot. Whereas you can get years of film at a North Carolina State University for Chandler Zavala, and you can see the progress because they don't have those like first round type guys there that you might see at an Alabama or an LSU. So that's doesn't really factor in for me. I'm just looking for the best guys available in terms of traits.
I like that. And those guys come in real hungry too. It's like I say every year when a guy comes in, we get UDFAs that come in and play their butt off. You look at last year's running back, Jordan Mason, who came in and made a third round pick for the second year in a row sit down. This is amazing how these guys come in with that chip on their shoulder. Anyway, Tony. All right. Johnny Robinson, I see here, says, don't we need some defensive linemen? Tony, you got one.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at this to me is I think in terms of the interior, they are set. You have Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, best interior duo in the league easily by far. And you have Javon Kinlaw and Kalia Davis back there as backups, who I really believe in. So from that perspective, I don't think they need any help on the inside. And I think interior defensive lineman is good in this draft. I just think at the spots that I took these other players, there were better players available for what the 49ers could use. So I'm not opposed to drafting there. I just don't see it as a real need unless a guy really wows you and he's the best player on your board. In terms of pass rushers, I I know a lot of people like Isaiah McGuire because of his run defense aspect to him that you could get at 99 or 101. For me, if I'm drafting a defensive end in a wide nine system, I'm thinking about purely how much potential do they have rushing the passer, not necessarily in the run game, because they will be fine in the middle and Nick Bosa will be great against the run. I'm not worried about that. So they're already a really strong unit that way. I know Hargrave has some issues in terms of run defense, but I don't think it's anything where you say he's below average. I think he plays a bit better than average against the run. I just don't really value that run defense aspect. So if I can get a guy like BJ Thompson, whose traits are off the charts good at 135, why would I pick him over a Chandler Zavala or a Darius Rush at those spots when I know they'll be gone before then? So that's kind of why I did that. I think defensive line is more an issue if you didn't have the depth that you have now. But the Niners have good depth, and they just re-signed Kerry Hyder. They bring in Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant, who aren't the best players, but they're depth. So I'm not really concerned about that.
You know, the thing I'm most concerned about with this defensive line this year, Monaghu, and I knew coming into the season last year, he was going to be a factor. We lost to Monaghu, and I said, where do you find another one of those? And I look at this kid you picked up, B.J. Thompson. He's long, and Monaghu was long, and Lane. You know, he's expensive. Imanahu's gone, but he came in and he saved some games. I really do believe that because Hargrave is going to do a good job. Hargrave initially was picked out to stop the run. So that thing, what we're getting with him with all those sacks, he's supposed to be a better run stopper. But we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
I bet you're noticing the same question I am. Are you looking at Michael Alani's?
I saw one. Let me see.
Okay,
yeah.
wait, let me hear the one you're thinking about, or what you're looking at.
No, it's the same one. It is.
It is, yeah, okay. Go ahead. Yeah. That sort of jumped off the page, didn't it? When I saw that one. Go ahead, Tony, get into it.
Yeah, so he said, with all due respect, this draft is a miss for me. The team is doing extensive work on quarterbacks, and you haven't addressed our kicker issue. Why? Defense isn't going to be a priority this year. What I'd say to that is, for quarterbacks, I'm not really concerned. It's a weak class once you get out of the top 5 guys. I know they've been doing their work into DTR, but he's going to probably be a 3rd-round pick. I really believe that. And I'm not willing to spend quarterback capital when I already have 2 rookie quarterbacks, not 2 rookies, but 2 young quarterbacks who are extended through 2025. And you just signed Sam Darnold. For me, the only guy I consider taking is Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and he's not going to be someone I want to take that early. I just don't see it. And the other guys behind that, it's not good. I know a lot of people like Jake Haener and Tanner McKee, but for the other guys I mentioned here, like, you'd be reaching for those quarterbacks where you can get real good backups for year 1 that can develop into excellent NFL starters in year 2 and 3. I'd rather take those guys than a camp arm who's going to be the 4th quarterback when Purdy's healthy. So for me, if there was a good enough quarterback, I would take one in the 4th or 5th round. That's not a problem. I just don't see it this year with that class. In terms of kickers, I think there's only 5 or 6 really good kickers in the league. And outside of that, you're going to have to make do with what you have. They just traded a pick for Zane Gonzalez. I would not be opposed to them taking a 7th-round kicker. But if they took a kicker in the 5th round, he better be a slam dunk home run. Because if he's not, you invested draft capital into 2 different kickers, one of which has been an average kicker in the NFL who can be serviceable. So why take that risk on a 5th or 6th round pick? You're probably going to need a 5th round pick for Jake Moody, who I think is the best kicker in the draft. He might even go earlier, late 4th round. I'm not willing to spend that capital on that guy. They bring in a UDFA, go for it, but you already spent capital there. In terms of defense, I disagree with the fact that defense isn't going to be a priority this year, because in my opinion, you're really setting up for next year. And you have Steve Wilkes, who has a completely different philosophy to D'Amico Ryans. They basically told him, we know you're different, but D'Amico Ryans had a lot of the elements that made our players so good. We need you to incorporate what we did last year into your plan this year. And Steve Wilkes is going to do some of that, but he needs new guys who fit the system better. And in terms of getting guys that he wants, I think that's a priority. You want your defensive coordinator to be happy where he is. And one thing I'll say too on that, I don't know if he's going to be a head coach anytime soon, even though he's qualified to be that. Given his stint in Carolina, it might be 2 to 3 years before he's considered for a job again. So you want him to be comfortable moving forward. And that's what I did in this draft, in my opinion, is get guys that fit what he wants to do and fill the holes there.
It's a good point. Steve Wilkes has been a head coach recently. What are we talking about? 3 seasons back with the Cardinals? 4 seasons? Was Wilkes actually? Cliff Kingsbury replaced Wilkes, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. So you're right. It could be a while. Wilkes has got to prove some things, but I wonder, we could have Wilkes for a long time because even if he looks good with the 49er defense, which I'm thinking he will do the personnel no matter what, that could be interesting. We could keep Wilkes for a while if he does a good job.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
I think with McDaniels, he was the OC after he was a Broncos head coach. He was the OC with the Patriots for over 10 years, right? Even though he's one of the best at what he did. And that's because teams didn't see it as a head coach because of his prior issues that happened when he was there in Denver. I think a lot could be said here about the Cardinals. And I don't really think he was given a fair shot because he was given a crap roster and then he went 3-13. You can't do a lot with that. But I still think it does factor into some decisions an owner might make.
There you go. Well, Tony, that's the questions pretty much I see. Some of the other things really aren't really questions, just more statements, unless you want to address anything else that you see in that chat.
I mean, I don't really see anything here that really jumped out at me. Unless somebody wants to ask a question right now, I think that's everything.
Yeah, if you got a question right now, go right ahead real quick while Tony and I are talking. I like what you hit the draft in a way where you took a good examination of each and every one of your players, and that's what I like. And you know how they'll either work or not work. You seem to have drafted for the needs of the 49ers, too. A lot of times people believe that BPA is the only way to go, when really I like that idea. I see a lot of guys that are just bust. I said, you know what, though? Will they work with the 49ers? I really do think about that sometimes. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think BPA is very important. You want to draft a guy that's at the top of your board, but also if you're just drafting guys and you have no plan for them and you don't see a future for them on your team, it's hard to employ them in a way that works for you. And I think for me with this draft here, it's more about, can I get guys that have good draft value at this spot? For example, Christopher Smith, I could see him going in the 2nd round, but because I've seen people mock him in the 4th so frequently, I'm very comfortable taking him there. Even though he's not necessarily the best player available, I think he could be. And he also fits a big need for the team at that moment. So for me, those types of picks are no-brainers. I try to focus in BPA, but if you have 5 or 6 guys with a similar grade, draft the guy that you have a plan for and that could help your team.
Yeah, especially like you're saying in the later rounds, round 1, round 2. But normally when you draft in round 2, these are very urgent picks. Every year I watch people go in and get quarterbacks, and they know nothing about him because their team is struggling. The fan base wants that particular player that's at the top of the draft. He just wants to get somebody in there to make people please get off me. I'm trying to do the best I can. He goes in and gets a guy like Zach Wilson, and I'll never forget this one. I've seen a lot of mistakes made down through the years, but interviewing Zach Wilson, I can't tell he has an attitude problem. I can't tell that just the things, when you're talking to these players, how do you bring him home and have to put him out the next day? That's crazy.
It's tough with those players too, because from the outside looking in from where we are, we don't have access to interviews and health information. So if a guy has a bad attitude or there's an injury that you're not sure about, you kind of have to factor that in blindly to your rankings with these guys and where you put them on the board. The team luckily has that information, so they should have known with Zach Wilson what he could have been in terms of attitude. But for us, it's really hard to see.
And then you look at Javon Kinlaw. I understand that's a degenerative condition he's got with that leg or with that knee, but we picked him up anyway. Now they've done some restructuring on his knee, and hopefully that may be all it takes. But you know what? It's probably a lot like Tommy John surgery or anything else that's that detailed. He's probably needed a year to heal up from that procedure to begin with, and he didn't get it because he's on the clock now. What we had Javon, this is going into the 3rd season now.
No, 4th.
4th. So see, he's got to get something done now, or he's going to be a casualty. It's sad, but we'll find out. He looks good right now. So yeah, the draft is a very scary thing. So
And I think with him, like in terms of talent, he was absolutely worth that pick. But the injuries are an issue. And now it's getting to a point where they're probably not going to pick up his 5th-year option because
yeah,
of what's happened. He's played
mm,
virtually no time in the NFL
yep,
over 3 seasons.
that's a
Um,
long time.
and I think they said last year they changed their philosophy a little bit with how they draft players and how they sign guys, where injuries factor in a lot more than they did 2017 to 2020 when they just wanted to build the best roster possible.
Yep, exactly. And it's a different situation now. And then you picked up the big kid, the defensive line we got last year, and redshirted him. They seem to be having him up to speed now. We're going to see what he looks like. What's his name? Ah, uh,
What are we talking about?
defensive lineman, the big guy we got in last year. We
Kalia
brought him in.
Davis?
Yeah, Kalia. I understand he looks good. He looks quick. He looks explosive. Maybe he could be the Amana who I'm talking about.
I think with him, he's gonna like really the quickness is gonna jump out at you. And I think he's gonna be a lesser DJ Jones with the potential to develop into an impact player like DJ Jones. That's really what I see with him.
Yeah.
It's
Sixth round
great
pick.
that he's what's up?
DJ Jones, 6th round pick. I'll never forget it. And he came in and he did great things. Well, that's the way it goes with 49ers. We get those late picks and they do things that nobody knew they were going to be able to do. So, what were you going to say about him, though?
Yeah, I'm excited for him moving forward. I think teams are really going to see what he can do. And the reason why he went so late is because of the injury. They knew he was going to take a redshirt year.
What round should he have been picked up in had he been healthy? Is he a second?
I think
round
maybe like a 4th-round pick, if I had to
pick.
guess. I don't think he was ever like top of the line amazing, but he would have gone a round or two earlier, in my opinion.
Chris Kasurik, if you're a 3rd round or 4th round pick, he's going to make you into a 2nd round pick anyway. So, I look at the guys we got now on our defensive line. How many? Okay, obviously, most of that starting unit, they're all 1st round picks. Who else comes in and could be ranked above what they were chosen in the draft? I think Chris Kasurik doesn't get enough love. Well, he gets a lot of love, but I guess they're padding him up. Chris, listen, if you'll stay with us, we're going to add this to your current contract. And Chris says, I don't need the DC job. I like what I'm doing, and I'm glad he does. Oh man, I don't know who he'd get.
It's a
after him.
big deal that you have a guy who wants to be a position coach because he's so good at it. It makes life so much easier. And they have to be paying him handsomely for that too.
Yeah,
There's no way he's getting paid like $1 million per year. It has to be more than that.
Oh God, yes.
But I see a question here, Ronbo.
Go right ahead.
Addicted to Action is asking why I'm taking 2 tight ends in the draft. Said Kittle's going to be here in the future, I hope. We need defensive tackle because Javon is a bust. I don't think we need defensive tackle. Javon Hargrave signed a 4-year contract. Eric Armstead got extended like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They're going to be there for a while. I think in terms of interior defensive lineman duos in the NFL, that's the best there is. I think you're really looking at the depth at this point for that position. And if Kinlaw's healthy, excellent depth. If Kalia Davis can be the player I think that he is, excellent depth. With the ability to still have a Kevin Givens on the roster where you have a guy who's been proven. So you really have everything you need there. If it were the best player available, yeah, I would take a defensive tackle. But at this point, again, for the guys that I took, I felt like at those positions, they were the best player available or close to that. So that's why I didn't take one. In terms of tight ends, the draft is a crapshoot. And we all know this. It's like less than 50% chance that your picks hit, right? And in terms of 4th to 7th round, it's even less than that. Maybe it's a 3rd or less. So if you get 2 tight ends, your odds of getting at least one of those guys to be successful is a lot higher. And it's over 50% if you know what you're doing and you can coach them. And in terms of having a tight end 2, there's no reason why we can't upgrade at tight end 2. It's one of the weakest spots in the roster, in my opinion.
And for years,
we saw that last year. Warner can't catch over the middle down the field. He doesn't get up the field at all. Runs like a 4.8 40. Rostowelli is either injured or is just not reliable in that way. He's not a savvy route runner. He's not going to wow you with going up at the catch point and mossing a guy, right? But these other 2 guys are more capable of that. And if we can get a guy in here to be a tight end 2 in the short term and could potentially be a tight end 1 in the long term because he can be that good, I think your odds of getting that type of player is higher if you take 2 of them in a draft where Strange could go in the top 100. and I'm taking him at 161 because of the possibility that he falls. It is so rich in tight ends this class. I just don't see a reason why drafting 2 is a bad idea. Given where we're picking and the fact that we don't have a first or second round pick, you have to go for the guys who you think will be successful.
Tony, you mentioned earlier, I just realized, because you're drafting for the future and possibility of the big paycheck guys, the big payday guys leaving, or actually maybe be able to force them out. Could the 49ers be really, I read an article where the 49ers are really serious about the tight end situation this year. Could the 49ers be contemplating moving, like you were saying earlier, package up a couple of those thirds and go right in the second round and get the guy they want, that they think they want?
I think for me, that question is, it depends on the situation. If Sam Laporta falls to 70, or Tucker Kraft is there in the mid 80s, maybe you move up. But for me, Josh Wiley is ranked ahead of Tucker Kraft. And unless you really love Sam Laporta, which he's really good, unless you really love him, are you really willing to give up 2 third-round picks and maybe a 4th-round pick to move into the 70s? I don't know if they are. I think it's more likely that they sit tight and take the best tight end available because there's going to be so many good ones there. There's maybe 11 or 12 tight ends in this class that I think could be starters in the league one day, which is a big deal, right? You don't need to reach for one of them. You don't need to trade up because someone in that same area of value is going to be there for you, regardless of if you trade up or not.
There you go. Tony, I love your formula. I really do. I don't care what anybody says. I think it's awesome. So, Tony,
Thank you.
Do you see any other questions we're going to address?
Red Zone Faithful, in your trade, don't you think it's too soon to move on from Thomas? He had a good rookie season. The way I'm looking at this now is it's going to be after day 2, right when the 4th round is starting. And at that point, you just drafted Darius Rush, who fits your system. Ambry Thomas doesn't really fit the system. He was almost cut last year on the roster. He was like the 5th corner on the roster last year. And for me, why not use a 6th-round pick and package Thomas in there to move up in the 5th round? And again, this is a really good class from rounds 3 to 5, 3 to 6. So if I can get more picks in the 5th round, which has been historically a strong point for them, I would not mind moving on from Thomas, who I don't like at all, doesn't fit the system, and quite frankly was almost cut last year.
Which is really blows my mind. He was put in because everybody went down last year. And he wasn't bad. Like you mentioned the Bengals game, though, he did get used. But everybody, you know what's really funny, Tony? Everybody seems to do well against the Rams. Except when we're hurt and they finally got past us, finally, in that NFC CG. But, normally it's everybody that has a good day against the Rams. Even guys that ordinarily are struggling other games. It's a bizarre situation. All right.
He was kind of propped up by circumstance and by getting a pick in the playoffs, but his play overall has not been good. So
poor Ambry. I still think there's something mentally wrong with him. He's got the tools, Tony. He's got the speed. His hips aren't tight. The guy's not bad. I don't know what his problem is.
Maybe he's not bad, but again, he's not a fit. And I think there's guys that are better on the roster, especially for drafting Darius Rush. So that's where I stand on that. Thank you guys for the questions. I think that's everything I see here, Ronbo.
All right. And Tony, appreciate you. Tony and I are going to be together on draft day, all of them, in fact. And Tony's going to break down each pick and see who's going to get a good ball player or not on day 1, day 2, and day 3. It's going to be our days, and that's what we're going to do. Tony, thank you so much. I want to say to G Block, Aldon Smith is in jail again. My favorite 49er of all time. Breaks my heart, compadre. Yeah, Tony, I really, Aldon Smith and J.J. Watt should have been running neck and neck to the HOF. And, it's, again, like I said earlier, character issues. I wonder when the 49ers, and back in the day when, that wasn't Trent Baalke did pick Aldon Smith, didn't he? I was thinking it was McClure, but it was Baalke. Yeah. Baalke had a lot of criminals. We were just the field. We just had a lot of guys that had issues with the system. So, now these guys are learning. So no more Reuben Fosters. We're going to be fine.
I agree. I think they've made character a big point now. So I don't see those issues moving forward. But yeah.
All right, Tony.
That's all I have for you, Ronbo.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Vamp, we're gonna go ahead and shut it down here, and we'll get ready to go back to our Sunday activity as far as that goes with more subject matter. You're gonna love it tonight. The subject is this: if you had to do over the draft, which is that time of year, if you had to do over the draft of 2021, how would you handle it? Tony, I'll see you in just a little while. All right. And with that said, Niners! I see you in a bit.